Anybody? Come on up, Tim. Tim is going to be our main speaker. We'll introduce him in a bit, but he's got a lot of friends and family. So, Tim, who all is here with you? Point them out.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tim. And here, Tim KLUG Sr., a Navy veteran. Served in, right? Yeah, there he is. His most retired from was Makwan. So if you know him, hopefully it was on a good note. Next to him is my throughout. She's there. Is my uncle. Next is my nephew Joey, and or Joey, whatever we want to. His mother. Oh, and his mother. Noel. And then Corey is my. I don't know. Mother-in-law, I think in the state of Wisconsin. Yeah. Yeah, one day they'll get married. But finally on these three little minions, my mini-me's, my oldest, my middle one, Ava Joy. She's going to be 17 next week. It's Ash. Look at them. He'll be January. So in this table here is a bunch of friends that wanted to environment. And over here is Joey's Eve. Husband Troy. He's a Delta pilot, and he does not give away free flights, and doesn't makes me upset. Not for me. And then their two children, or the little guy. I don't know if I ever met him, but okay, cool.
Call their names. What are their names?
All right, you guys ready to stand up? Oh, okay. We have Nikki and Christopher Schmelio, or we call him Schmiel. Buffy. I don't even know your last name. What is it? Jafke. Buffy Jafke. Scott Kuskow, good friend. He is an ex-CB from the Navy. So, yeah. And this happy little couple here is Nick and Jordan. Recently bought a new house in Grafton and going to get married soon, right, Nick?
Who are those folks who came in the city?
Oh, Steph, I didn't even see you guys show up. Brett, he's an ex-drill sergeant. He was a drill sergeant in the United States Army.
We can't see you back there. Both of you, stand up.
And his girlfriend, Steph.
Okay, good.
Stephanie Elliott. All right.
Everybody. Okay, now, look at you. Tim KLUG is a friend of ours here. He's a newer member of our American Legion. And many of the men who fought in Afghanistan and Iraq are not ready to come forward yet. They're busy with their careers, with their families. And just like with the Vietnam veterans and the World War II veterans, they waited till they were like maybe 60s or 70s to like, hey, I want to get my story told. So we are highly grateful here to have an Iraq war veteran come and talk and share with us. He's got a great presentation, and afterwards we're going to have a question and answer period. So without further ado, let's all welcome Sergeant First Class Tim KLUG. Give him a good welcome.
Hello, everybody. Thank you. Hey, Jordan, can you hand me that microphone? Thank you. Uh-oh. That's off? Yeah. So who turned it off? That is not good. It's going to take... Nope, it's off. There it goes. All right, that was not supposed to get turned off because it takes 5 minutes to turn back on from what I heard. So let me entertain you and say hi. Nope. Just hit the... Okay, you just hit the left arrow, or right arrow. Well, thank you everybody for coming tonight. Very excited to be here. As Ken mentioned, I am a veteran of the Iraq War. I'm here to talk to you about our mission. Couple of housekeeping items. I'm going to do my darndest that I'm not going to use military vocabulary. But even when I was showing my son some of these videos, because I have thousands of pictures and videos from our deployment, and even my 12-year-old son, showing him, I was like, I effing remember that. Oh my God. No? Okay, I swear I will do my best. I've been known to be a talker, so I wish I had a cowbell that my daughter could start banging when she says I'm talking too much. But we don't have that. How are we doing, Scott? So, hold that quick. It should, there it goes. Okay. So, I am here to talk to you about our journey. This is really one of the many journeys that I did in my time in service, probably the most important one. I have what I call a pre-mobilization or pre-deployment part of my life, and then a post-deployment. So next slide. I'm going to start with the send-off. Next slide. This was us. We were at our armory that we deployed out of. So you saw the tote that was right over here. We had a tote, everybody had one, that we would have to load up along with 3 other bags. I don't know, I can't think of what they're called right now. So if anybody... Yes, duffels, thank you. I'm not nervous, you are. Okay, so that's what we spent for about 3 weeks doing that and getting things going. And like any other military type of environment, there's always a dog and pony show about going away. So next slide. And here's the one at the 440th down in Mitchell International. We had a send-off where family and friends would come. And my daughter at the time was 2.5, 3 months old. So she was like pretty much putty in my hands. Next slide. Walking on American Airlines flights, right? They're communist. So we loaded that flight and we flew down to Camp Shelby, Mississippi. Next slide. This is, I'm sorry? Little blurry. I hope I don't make it blurrier. Wait, there we go. 3. All right, this is us loading onto the flight. Next slide. So we went to Camp Shelby, Mississippi. Has everybody ever been to Camp Shelby, Mississippi? Whew, I'll tell you what. That place, I mean, we left in April of 2006, and it was, I don't know, maybe 40 degrees. It was probably a hot day in Wisconsin. Next slide. We went, and it was instant summer. So I'm not going to go too much over what we did in Shelby, but what we did there is for 3.5 months, they were training us, pre-mob training. And this is a picture of the primary thing that we all want to know is how to operate the weapons. And our first sergeant put together a contest, and there's 4 lanes, 4 platoons, and we all had to wear blindfolds, and we would tear the weapon apart and put it back together. And whoever was done first won. My platoon did not. Some would say blame the platoon sergeant, but that was me. So, okay. All right, next slide. So this is my platoon. I am right there. I'm the platoon sergeant. That was the platoon leader. He was our company XO as well. So, but that was my platoon. Go ahead, next slide. Oh, another dog and pony show. When we graduated training, they had a ceremony, and this man here, I'm sure some of you recognize him, he was our current governor at the time. And obviously, I'm really thrilled. Nothing to do with politics. He's just the one that sold us over there. Because every time a unit would get deployed, the state that deployed them would get more funding. So, next slide. That was, I don't know, Mom, who was that? Doyle, yeah, that's right. Okay, so this is we're flying over the Alps, but let's talk about when we left Camp Shelby. We flew from Camp Shelby to Bangor, Maine, and that was going to be our trip overseas. And we left Bangor, Maine. About a half hour later, the captain of the plane says, "Hey, everybody," I mean, I don't know, Troy, should you be saying this? We're having a little hydraulic malfunction. We're close enough to the States, so we're just going to swing around, dump fuel, and go back to Bangor, Maine, and have that addressed. We're like, okay, all right, whatever. So we flew back in, and when we were landing, we saw on the tarmac, like, wow, why are there so many fire trucks there? Like, what the hell? So we landed, and it was boom. I mean, worst landing. I mean, there was no hydraulics. All of a sudden, we got this sense of, like, burning smell, and everybody seemed calm until we reached up to the gate, and all of a sudden, the stewardesses are saying, okay, everybody get off. Now, mind you, there's 300 people on this flight, all with weapons, and we're not allowed to leave our weapons at any time. And they said, just leave them there, get off. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? So we were just racing to get off that thing. Turns out we ended up spending another night in Bangor, Maine, which was cool. Because we got comped hotel rooms where we could sleep. What do you think we did? We didn't sleep. We went to go get some Maine lobster. And some drinks, because God knows when we're going to have a drink. So, but anyways, we ended up shipping out, and we went flying to Kuwait. And this is a picture I took. I thought it was cool to be able to see the Alps flying over Austria and whatnot. Next slide. All right, so this is flying into Kuwait. And it was like, holy cow, when you look outside, we're used to green upon green. It was just desert. And so that's that. So flying into Kuwait, next slide. What did they have us do? More training. So we spent about 36 hours training there. So we had to, go shoot things. And all right, next slide. So this is us at the range. My buddy Stankovitz. Now, one of the reasons why they had you do that is A, because of the jet lag that you fly in the country with. B, you got to acclimate to 120 degree weather. And flying into Kuwait, stepping off the plane, it was like, wow. It's like, the best way to describe it is stand behind a semi, and you know how the exhaust comes out? What'd you do? What'd you do?
I gotta blame the Navy guy.
Yeah, well. Oh my gosh, Scott. Oh, all right, cool. All right, so you stand beside a tractor or a semi, and the exhaust coming out. That's just you there. It's like, because it's so windy, it's just heat coming at you. But it's a lot more doable than Camp Shelby, Mississippi. Because 95 degrees with a 96% humidity, it's like breathing out of a sponge. So go ahead, next slide. That was my friend, local Stephen Kiesel. He lives in Brown Deer. Go ahead, I know we're John Wayne in it. All right, so we were getting stationed or getting prepared to go to our permanent duty station. And our permanent duty station is right here on the border of Kuwait and Iraq, and it's Safwan. So when we were going through training, we flew into Kuwait City. Over here, we did training here for a day and a half, and then transport up to Camp Navistar, Kuwait. Go ahead, next slide. So, life on Camp Navistar. This was our fob. That was our home. And I mean, it had everything that most people don't think that we were able to have, but you can kind of see here, this is where we lived in 8-man tents. Chow hall. Actually, I'll just go to the next one because I'll break that out. Oh yeah, these are friends. So we moved in, we found new friends. This guy was in our tent. I'm like, lovely. As you can see by the pus, I stepped on him. So go ahead, next slide. We also had other friends. Right here, that's Krusty. It was just a random dog that would always hang out. I'm a dog lover, so I was all about him. Unfortunately, the people that worked or owned the fob were not. One day he was gone. So next slide. I named him Crunchy. Krusty was the first one. This is a puppy. And Crunchy, he would come and eat, because who knows if they were eating or what. Next slide. So outside of our Tactical Operations Center, which is a TOC, this is an example of everything that people like you would donate to the troops in Iraq. We got so much of it that we had a cabinet built, so we had everything sorted out. So if troops needed something, they needed deodorant, they needed Kleenex or whatever, books, even just morale stuff. It was all there. They can just go and help themselves. So thank you all for that. It did mean a lot. Next slide. All right, so this was our chapel. We did have a chapel. They did have multiple services. Saturdays they had the Catholic service, they had a non-denominational Protestant service and a Lutheran service. There, next slide. Subway. Most people don't know about this. We were a smaller fob. So when you get in country, there's cities, other fobs, that had Burger King, they had Subway, Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, and everybody had their favorite fob they want to go to. But yeah, we had a Subway and we had a Pizza Inn. Go ahead, next slide. This was our gym, our workout area. Go ahead, next slide. This was dedicated to 2 troops. They were in the unit we replaced. They're both from Green Bay, Wisconsin, and that got hit by an IED and passed. Next slide. MWR, Morale, Welfare, and Recreation. This is a tent, next slide I'll show you, that has things like game centers, like where they would have video games. They had a little small theater that you could watch a movie in, a library, internet cafe, phone center. This is before the smartphone, by the way. So we didn't have that there. We had cell phones, but they're flip phones. They were rendered useless. Next slide. Fire station. Every fob has a fire station. It was a cool thing. A lot of people would go whatever fob they were at. These are civilians and contracted firefighters that would come on base, and they'd all have their FDNY type of shirts, out there. Next slide. This is what powered the entire fob. This was a generator, and all of the electricity, all of everything was there. Very loud. My tent was right next to it. Go ahead. Next slide. This is a medical center, TMC. Next slide. We did have volleyball court in Ava. Nobody wanted to play with me because I was just St. John Smith out there rocking it. He was a professional sand volleyball player back in the day. I don't know, Scott, do I have to get my 13-year-old? Okay, next slide. All right, this is a basketball court and just a common area. Go ahead, next slide. Yeah, we had AV sponsored jewelry. They love their jewelry over there. I had dog tags made. One tag had my initials, and another tag had my initials in Arabic. So I don't know, it's cool. Next slide. They did have embroidery. Dad, do you want to grab that patch that I had made? No? Okay, awesome. All right, so that, what does that even say? Is that like... Okay, got it, yep. It was pretty cool, yeah. So, all that stuff. Next slide, please. All right, this was our dining facility out there. It was pretty big, but they had a picture of that, so I wanted to show you. Next slide. This is our dry dock. This is, you'll hear about people coming, like big artists coming, doing shows and everything for the troops. They didn't come to our base, but there was a couple of groups that were actual soldiers that would play up there. Next slide. All right. Now we're getting into good stuff. Sandstorms. Sandstorms on the regular. Yeah. I mean, it's like you go from day, it's always sunny in Iraq and Kuwait, but then all of a sudden it's not. Next slide. This was my first sandstorm. Literally, I was just like, what the hell's going on? And the current guy was like, that's a sandstorm. So this picture took a whopping probably a second and a half to take, because I ran out there, did this, and then ran back in. It's like a sandblaster. Next slide. So this is the living quarters of our FOB. These here are bathrooms. These here are showers. These here got cleaned once a week on Tuesday. I use those once a week on Tuesday. I tell you, they were terrible. Oh man, terrible, terrible, terrible. All right, next slide. This is in front of our tent. So, I know, we were comedians. So our tents, 8-person tents, again, and they had a little walkway built in, door here, and a door right there. Next slide. So, everybody had an 8x8 area of occupation. This was mine. Now, I am not a carpenter by trade. Everybody has a bed, but I'm like, you know what? This is going to be like a dorm room. So I made this couch. I made it. And I slept on it. Next slide. I don't know why that picture is, I don't know who took it, but whatever. But this gives you an idea. There's our wall locker, had all of our, uniforms, everything of that nature. Anything people would send you. I had a TV, because they had a TV, our predecessors had one, so I bought one off of them. Anybody here ever been to Pike Lake Chain, or by Lac du Flambeau, or Minocqua? Yeah? Excellent. That hat is Muskie Jack's. My dad and I went up there a weekend before, we have property up there, before I got deployed, and the owner then, rest in peace, Dave, he said, hey, take a picture of that and send it back to me. Next slide. This was me, Christmas. We had people I worked with or my company, they all got together and sent me a bunch of stuff. And I did a lot of running, and they must have thought I did it for love. But, yeah, so it's just me being like, hey, guys, thank you. Okay, go ahead, next slide. Christmas. So we kind of went all out. We did Christmas decorations, put a Christmas tree on top of our tent. Next slide. I'm a huge fan of gummy bear, like anything gummy. Somebody sent me these and these, so I'm just worshiping the gummy gods. Thank you. Next slide. Okay, here's where we're going to get technical. This is a video. Next to, in the lower left-hand corner, there should be a play button. And just keep it on there, because I'm going to tell you when to pause. Oh, shoot, we need sound. Did this turn off? Okay, try it now. So yeah, we're just getting, we call this slap happy. We both just got off mission and we're like, hey. Okay, so now you can press pause. Yep, no, I said press pause. I said press pause. Sorry guys, you didn't have to see the next slide. All right, so this is a sandstorm again, just showing you there. Next slide. Next slide. So they also had, once a month, we let locals come in, sponsored by AAFES, Army Air Force Exchange Services. They would come up and sell their products. And it was interesting. We could, buy switchblades and medieval stuff or whatever. But I bought a few things. Next slide. These are my kids. This is Joey, Noah, and Ava. I had backpacks made for them. I bought them. My uncle wears combat boots. I loved this shirt when I saw it. Sleep well, America. My daddy has your back. So, and her, I know her now. I'm kidding. Next slide, please. All right, so let's talk about our mission. Our mission was convoy security. We had two primary missions there. Number one was a sustainment mission, and number two was a green mission or a cult. I don't even know what the acronym stood for. It was a military mission. So, next slide. Our mode of transportation. This is a gun truck, and this is the gun trucks we inherited. You'll see that there is armor, up armor, on here. We had our emblems painted there, but they very quickly had to get taken back just because they know who they're dealing with. Next slide. This is an up armor of what that is. So what you saw was up armored of this. So next slide. This is what our further up armor went to, because it's our cat and mouse game. It really is. We up armor our vehicles to prevent damage. They up armor their bombs. So it was just a matter of getting there to understand. So that's me at a clearing area. We got off mission. Go ahead, next slide. When we said up armor, this is what we called a rhino. And what this rhino does is it folds down and leads the gun truck. And the reason for it was because they were so sophisticated that any motion sensor, they saw that, okay, now they have to change the angle of what they're actually going to be firing off at us. So that thing would trigger motion sensors before it would hit the truck. Go ahead, next slide. And then we got the ASV. This thing was a hot commodity when they rolled this out. Everybody wanted one, but they quickly decertified it because, yeah, I mean, it seems safe, but once something breaks inside of it, getting out of it doesn't work. It bounces around and, yeah, causes more problem than good. Next slide. All right, so let's talk about our sustainment mission. What was it? We referred to it as a cedar push or cedar run. What we did is we escorted supplies to sustain the force with refrigerated food trucks, which we refer to as reefers, fuel trucks, tankers, and U.S. mail too. It all came through Kuwait. They would link up to us and then we'd escort them to a base. Go ahead, next slide. So this is what our portion of a sustainment mission is. Camp Navistar Kuwait right here. Our job was to escort this round of trucks up to Camp Cedar, Iraq, and drop them off, and another unit would take them to another place, and then we would pick up empties and escort them back to Kuwait to get refilled. Next slide. So when we had to run these missions, we had an MCT lot, a movement control team, okay? And movement control team is all based out of independent contractors, civilians, that run the movement and plan the movement. And once the security element, that was us, we'd have to wait and, like, I don't know, an hour before, link up with the trucks. Next slide. And this is what we linked up with. These are trucks, examples of tanker units and reefer units, either food, all that good stuff. And they're driven by third country nationals. They're not driven by Americans. Third country nationals meaning you've got Pakistanis, you've got any Thai people, you know, it doesn't matter. They're getting paid pennies on the dollar to drive these trucks. Next slide. We link up with them, and then we escort them to the base. That's what our sustainment mission would look like. Go ahead, next slide. Then we have our cult, our green missions. That's military, okay? And we're moving in units, vehicles, and whatever base they were assigned to go, we would escort them. So we could go as far north as Mosul, Baghdad, Anaconda. I mean, we saw the entire country. We can go west to Al-Assad, and yeah, so wherever they needed to go, anything that needed to get on a fob, and when I say anything, I mean anything. Next slide. So this is an example of a green convoy, if you will. We also did have HET convoys, heavy equipment tractor trailers. Next slide, and that's what this looks like. Okay, so this is a Marine unit I think we were moving in, and it got an Abrams tank. These things, they were the worst missions. Not because they were dangerous, they were just slow. These things top out at 45 miles an hour. So when you're driving down the road, it's like, oh, just get there, get there. All right, next slide. So here's another example of a HET mission. I wanted to show this because what does this look like to anybody? Anybody want to tell me? A what? It's not a train. This is vehicle transport, civilian vehicle transport. Next slide. We were escorting excursions, Hummers, Tahoes, whatever, for the contractors to drive on base. Yeah, that kind of pissed us off. Next slide. All right, so when we go to these bases, we would stay in transient housing. And there was, if any of the base, depending on the base you would stay at, this was one of my favorite, even though it was, you're sleeping on cots. It was cold, the air conditioning was really good. But you just go in there, you pick a spot, dump your stuff. It's just one backpack usually, and that's where you slept. Next slide. Then you had not so good areas. This is Tumors Truckers Inn, the only transient housing that Camp Taji had, or Fob Taji. This is exactly what it looks like. No rundown warehouse. Just like beds just randomly placed around. No air conditioning. It was just a nightmare. Anyways, next slide. So what was our biggest threat? I have a quote on here. It's called the first 30 and the last 30. First 30 days and the last 30 days. I don't know why, but they know when there's a transition going on. People, those two individuals that we dedicated the gym to, that they were in their last 30. Next slide. IEDs, improvised explosive device. These are not pictures that I took. These are pictures that I just took down. I mean, improvised explosive devices could be as little as this. See the cell phones? Could be as big as this. but they got very sophisticated with it. Essentially, 155 artillery rounds, they trigger up, they'd stack them, they trigger it up, and they have a trigger mechanism that, however that is an example of a pressure plate where you drive over it, that triggers it. Cell phones, they call cell phones, boom, triggers it. Go ahead. EFPs, explosive form projectiles. That I mentioned earlier about the cat and mouse game. We up armored to protect ourselves against the IEDs. They came out with the EFPs. And what the EFPs are, essentially, they take a tube, multiple tubes, stupid Navy. Just kidding. Dad. So, and they would stuff it with anything. Screws, nails, bullets. And once we can get that going again, it's going to be a long session if this is what it's going to be. All right, so here's an example of some shrapnel that went in. And what that does is they would seal it with copper melting, lower burn ratio of a metal. And when that thing blows, the copper goes out first and pierces through the armor, and all the little things follow it. And that's the scary part. And I'll show you about what the damage can kind of do. Next slide. All right. So this is an example of a IED blast on an unarmored truck that was driven by a TCN. Go ahead, next slide. This is the blast hole, or the crater that it left. Next slide. It's another example. Next slide. This is what an example of an IED can do. This is hit by a pressure plate. So it took out the engine block on the 1151 or the gun truck. Next slide. Another example, because we would escort these guys back after they were hit, and we would take the trash out. Next slide. All right, this one here hits home. This is an example of what an EFP can do. Not too much damage on the gun truck, right? It's holes like here, 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 and here. These are what the killers are. Like a little piece of shrapnel will get in there and will take it out. This gun, or this truck, was in our last 30 days. And my buddy Stephen Mudick, who ended up marrying my cousin, was sitting right there. We were doing side-by-sides. So next slide, we'll see what it sees on the inside. This is what that hole looked like on the inside. These windows are, boy, maybe a foot thick, and it just went right through it. He was so lucky that he was looking down on his either iPod or something like that. If he was looking up, it would have taken out his jugular. But he was looking down, and whatever the shrapnel was, ate his Kevlar on the front and caused a huge gash in his forehead. But he lived. So, next slide. All right, so I pulled this. This is the death rates that were from 2003 to 2010. It has everything from bookings in institution, eye casualties, Iraq body count, meaning civilians, ministry count, meaning politicians, and then U.S. military. We served, what you guys are watching right now is right here. Okay, this is a period of time where they called the surge. The surge is in fall of 2006. We went from a head count in country of about 50,000 to 120,000 because we were preventing doing everything we could to prevent or regain control of the country. Go ahead, next slide. Yeah. This is Stephen Kastner, Cedarburg resident. Not even 48 hours in the country, when we got up to Navistar, they took us on mission. First one, were we prepared? Who knows? I will tell you this. The people that we replaced, they said, okay, we went through the same training that you did in Camp Shelby. Forget everything. Listen and watch us, because this is how unique our mission was. Next slide. This was that same dry dock we had a ceremony at. I was actually on the firing squad for it. Next slide. Hit play, please. Yeah, microphone, please. Let's do this. Let's just do this. Is it playing? Wow, it's not even playing right now. Oh, gotta love technology. Alright, let's try this now. Nope. I just wanted to play on my computer. Alright. Unfortunately, it's not. Alright, now do it. I'm gonna restart it. Good Lord.
Today, 4th of June, first truck went out on a convoy. It was Sergeant Sternberg, Specialist Cass, Specialist Belco, and Sergeant from Naval Technology Fort. And it was hit by an IED. And Specialist Cass.
Jesus Christ, man. That, what you guys were just witnessing, that's my friend Michael O'Donnell, who was in the same platoon as Kastner, and was very close with him.
Today, 4th of June's first truck went out on a convoy. It was Sergeant Sternberg, Specialist Cass, Specialist Belco, and Sergeant from Naval Technology Fort. And it was hit by an IED.
Almighty, man.
Action.
Good God, man. Guys, I'm sorry about this. Here's an F4.
Was killed in action.
This is such a shame. Oh, God. I would say next slide, but we want to be able to show you a slide. Let's have a loose connection somewhere. All right. Yeah, it is. Nope. Ken, did Paul come back?
He's not here yet, no. He'll be very, very shortly, however.
Yeah, guys, that was a very moving. It's probably, you know what, everything happens for a reason. It's probably why we weren't watching that. But Stephen Kastner, his new home is now at the VA cemetery in Milwaukee here. I visit him, I don't know, like 2 or 3 times a year. I VA, that's my primary care, and I'll stop by my appointments. All right, so those missions that I talked about, the sustainment missions and the military convoy missions, we were stationed right here. Thank you. We were stationed right here. That's where Camp Navistar was. Units would link up with us and we would have to drive around Safwan. So, next slide. Driving through Safwan. We had issues with an acronym called JAM. That was a local insurgency there. And they would have banners up promoting themselves, but we had a route security echelon that would monitor the missions from the ground. Next slide. Kids. You see kids everywhere. They have kids in Iraq, and getting used to seeing them on an everyday basis. Seriously, this is insanity. Mom, would you like to come up and tell the story? Oh, there's enough light. We see this. Fine, thank you, so. All right, so these are kids. Next slide, please. Other kids going to school. Next slide. All right, hit play. He was a Misfits fan. And whatnot. Gatorade, us, everything in nature. Sometimes we would, sometimes we wouldn't. This is insanity. All right, we can just skip that. Next slide. So life on the road, when we're out on the road, this is an example of all the different FOBs that were on base. And when we're dealing with green convoys, this is where it depends where they're going. That's as far north, far west, far south that we're going to be in. We saw the entire country essentially. Yeah. All right, next slide, Scott, please. The country was on fire. The entire country. I mean, you see sea upon sea of sand in the south, and you'll see this is not any combat. This is oil refineries burning off. They're everywhere. Everywhere. Next slide. Right here. Oil refinery. Next slide. People, like, they would just live in huts. And next slide. My kids call him Uncle. His kids call me Uncle Tim. And I should use. No, it's definitely not an oasis. But yeah, housing developments or whatever, families will live together inside walls and whatnot. Next slide. Believe it or not, it's very beautiful there. You get great sunsets. You'll see a lot of those. But this is us in the morning, driving back down south, and during sunrise, excuse me. Next slide. Yeah, some of our missions where we were going, if they were in town, get Apache escorts as well. They would be one side of the convoy, and they would be scouting the side of the roads and everything. There was one mission we got, just went out and just went, and I mean, I've never been more safe. But this is a that we would go to, and if we got lucky that we had time, and we would. Next slide. This is us. One of their. That locals would live in. Next slide. Back is word centers. Yeah. Next slide. Ran, and I found. I don't know. Anybody seen the Super Troopers? You probably means spread it on. Anyways, next slide. So this was the road that we built, or not us, that was under construction. They were building a new ancillary supply route to get us to the main supply route, which was. Clean anything up. Next slide. CBs. These guys are the ones that were making the road. So, Scott, that is my shout out to you. He was the CB. Next slide. All right. So, we got to where we linked up with the main supply route. And the convoy ahead of us, we saw it from a distance, the black smoke. And we're like, uh-oh, how far away is it? 1, 2, 3, boom. So 3 miles away, 3 clicks away. And we got to the turnoff to get onto the MSR, and we were at a halt because they were dealing with their IED. Well, my point truck reached out over the net and said, Disciple, there's a young kid that we saw run down the berm off the bridge and just hop in a truck. And I asked, what was he wearing? He was like, he was wearing Western dress, because we weren't looking for these guys. We were looking for those guys. These are the guys that come from out of country, Syria, Iran, Turkey. They're joining the insurgency, the jihad against the infidels, which were the infidels. So, yeah, next slide. All right. because of the fact that we had a suspected trigger man, we had to document it all. All right, Scott, if you could press play right there. I don't know why it's not playing. Wow, we can get it to project, but we can't. I mean, there's actual conversation going now. None of them speak English, by the way. These guys were not there until we got there. And all of a sudden, they saw us confronting him, and boom, like magic, they were there. So, click on that one, Scott. This one. Yeah, so ultimately what's going on right now is we're waiting on the sheriff, which is another Army unit that is here to, they own that area of occupation, that part of the country. We're waiting for them to come and take over. Yeah, there he is. Yeah, so we're basically trying to communicate with them to say, hey, we're waiting for more people. While we were waiting, they wanted to call their people, and they asked us to turn off the warlock. A warlock is a thing on the back of our trucks that would send out a signal. So anybody within a certain amount of space, they can't use anything electronic. And he couldn't use his cell phone to call his people, and he asked me to turn it off. And I said, no, hell no. Hell no. So I don't know even what happened right here, but because there's two other videos. All right, next slide. Yeah. All right, so this is the traffic jam we caused by hopping in. This is the bridge off of and hopped in the guy's truck. So some of the vehicles are driving in the desert to go around us or whatever the case may be. Next slide. Ultimately, we didn't get to see the videos, but we confiscated everything that was on him. It was a cell phone, some money, all that stuff. But then we searched the truck because the guy said he didn't know him at first. Then he said it was his son, whatever the case may be. But we found hidden another cell phone because both of them already had a cell phone. And yeah, that was it. So we took them into custody and then waited and handed them off to the sheriff. Next slide. This is the ID hole that they hit, or they detonated. Next slide. So you can kind of see there. Next slide. The INGs, the Iraqi National Guard. We trusted them more than the Iraqi police. But next slide. City of Ur. Ur is a biblical book on the Ur. U-R. Yes, yes, we got some either biblical or Muslim people here. I don't know, but yes, yes, and it's referenced in the book of Genesis and the birthplace of, in our world, Abraham, and in the Islamic world, Muhammad. So this is the temple of Ur that we got to go visit if we were in the area. Next slide. This is the actual city. The city is on ruins. They were doing a reconstruction project, Iraqis were, until Saddam took over and then he put a kibosh to it. So that's as far as they went. Next slide. It's us on the temple. Next slide. It's me standing in the city of Ur. Next slide. Everybody knows this. I'm sure you've seen it in some shape or capacity. This is in the green zone in Baghdad. This was Saddam's parade staging area. Next slide. So even when we were on mission, we would have individuals that would need to fix or get maintenance halts, and these individuals would have to fix it themselves. So this is what it would be looking like. Next slide. This is in Taji, sunset in Taji. Next slide. There's a tank that's on the side of the road. Majority of our missions were done at night. Some were on during the day, but we always fluctuated SP times or starting point times. Next slide. This right here, we saw those everywhere. Those are little squalls of sand, little mini tornadoes, sand tornadoes, if you will. Next slide. All right, so this is a fob, an anaconda. Now this is a maintenance. Now there are times where we would have maintenance that would need to be done on our trucks, but if it wasn't mission essential, like we could roll with our trucks, we'd wait till we would come into one of these, because you pull in and you'd have 12 independent contractors just working on your vehicle. It's like, well, that's not what we want. Well, we're just going to do this anyways. Yeah, they're making way more money than we were making. Next slide. Okay. Do we dare? Do we dare? Video. Hit play. Okay. So this is what it's like on the road. Tanker got hit, and they just let it burn. Let it burn out. Yeah, I thought it was just crazy. It's like, oh, that's great. I can't wait to see what happens to me by smelling that. All right, next slide. Next slide. All right, so this is location. It was kind of a hot spot, but there are security elements kind of put a kibosh on it, but that was at one time a terrorist cell where they would create IEDs and whatnot. Next slide. Yep, even civilians would get injured, and it was our responsibility to take care of them. That there is my friend, Staff Sergeant Nunn. He was a medic. This is a TCN that his truck got blown up and we had to treat him. Next slide. Donkeys. Yeah, I don't even know why that's there. But next slide. So this is Scania. That was the first tree I saw in like 3 months. And I bear hugged that tree. I was like, wow, that's so cool. I haven't seen a tree in forever. Next slide. So this is at Taji. This is at the boneyard. All the vehicles that were part of the original Gulf War, everything, we collected them all throughout the country and created a boneyard. Next slide. This is when your military bearing comes into play. Just be patient. Mine's not very good right now. All right, next slide. Okay, so here's a mission that we went on. This was probably the craziest mission I was on. Next slide. So I'm going to start it off on Scania. Every time we were on a cult mission, we would go halfway up the country and we'd stay at CSC Scania. Now, outside of Scania, they would have, we called it Haji Marts. It's all local. We're outside the wire, and it's all locals that are selling goods or whatever. Next slide. That's me outside. Next slide. This guy, we called him the Hustler Najee. Oh, it's all right. And he was selling his gear, and you can see you've got series. This is all pirated stuff. You've got DVDs of the entire series of Seinfeld, the entire series of whatever, and it's all pirated stuff. But yeah, so we would go out and buy, and some of the stuff was really good, some of it was really bad. Next slide. Yeah, and this is what they'll get from it. This was a Christmas gift I got my father. I knew he was a big Westerner guy. Clint Eastwood collection, everything that he's done since 2000. I don't know if he ever watched it or if he attempted to watch it. Next slide. Okay, so after that, the next day we rolled out. Now, when we're rolling out, there's certain times that are the hot times when IEDs strike. So perfect timing for us would our SP would be 7 o'clock or 2100. This time we were slated to leave at 1700, and we found out that EOD was ahead of us. So a couple different things. EOD ahead of us, very slow. Very slow. We stop at everything that they find. Worst thing about it was, like, okay, we're going to go through the hottest parts of the country at the hottest. So hit play on this. So we're running out of country. We leave the barricades, then we're free to test fire our guns on our gun truck. You can see the Rhino that's put out in front. Here's where pucker factor comes in. It's like you don't know. All right, next slide. Okay. This is where the thank you Jesus time came. So we got about, I don't know, we were an hour and a half on mission, and we were halted because EOD had a PID, potential IED. Hit play on that. Oh, it was real. Crisis diverted. So we made it another half mile. We got halted again for another PIED. This time my point truck was like, I'm going to do this one in NODS, night vision. Okay? So we can Charlie Mike, quarter mile up the road, we got halted again. Yeah. So here's what, let me explain to you what just happened. Okay? Shortly after that, when we started rolling, a complex attack started. What the mission, or what their mission was to do, these are a set of daisy chain IEDs. The last one you saw was the first one supposed to hit the front of the convoy. All three of them would go off at the same time. This would hit the front, that would hit the middle, and that would hit the back. They wanted the biggest one on the front because that stops the convoy. Okay? And then once they all go off, then the RPGs start flying. Then the small arms fire starts coming. And so we were able, due to the fact that we had EOD with us, they detonated what was probably going to cause the most damage before it happened. But once we got to our respective positions, because I was in a middle truck, that I remember seeing in the front of the convoy, I'm looking up and I'm like, what the hell is that? Is that a firefly? What is that? What the? Oh my God, there are RPGs. And they just came in, small arms firing over you, all that good stuff. Yeah, it was kind of a crazy mission. So, God bless EOD, Explosive Ordnance Disposal. That's what EOD is, by the way. Next slide. So this was my gunner on there. Next slide. So on the way back, we made it up to Anaconda, and on the way back, we had a lieutenant from a transportation company that wanted to get back to Camp Arifjan, Kuwait, on the port, because, I don't know, like Garth Brooks was playing or something. I don't know. It was like, he's like, you're killing me, man. I mean, we did a 13-hour march, and we said we need to give our vehicles a rest. We need a rest, and the truck broke down. So that's us waiting for the wrecker to come. Next slide. And that's what we rolled with our rest of our mission. Yeah, we're a security element. Next slide. And so we were placed in the rear, so this is them looking at the rear of the convoy, making sure that nobody comes up and whatnot. Next slide. It's another pool. This is at Taji. Next slide. All right. I said earlier about the IPs. These guys, I don't know, they would just set up random checkpoints. This particular checkpoint was not approved by the sheriff. So we stopped to find out, what are they doing? These IEDs that we would see at night, especially, we'd be driving down the MSR, and we would see over the bridge a Iraqi police officer, like, oh shit, I mean shoot, and he would, yeah, they were always around. I didn't trust him. I felt bad. My dad was a police officer. I had very little for cops after this. So, cops. Next slide. All right. Next slide. Yep, this is, we stopped and talked to these guys because, boy, you don't look like Iraqi National Guard. You look like a bunch of mercenaries. Next slide. So here is the boneyard that I was referring to earlier. And these are all equipment from the original Iraq War and the initial push in 2003. Next slide. I don't know, people would just write graffiti all over the place. Next slide. Here's Iraqi tanks. Next slide. Everybody took their Hollywood moment and straddled the gun, or excuse me, it's another one, and we may have already seen that too, my apologies, but another complex. Next slide. All right, the little kids, these kids, when we would go into the certain fob in our sustainment mission, they would always be asking for water or whatever, or they would try to sell us some items, like generic Viagra. I mean, I'm not kidding. They're like, oh yeah, make you big. And I'm like, okay. Like, some people need it. So you can kind of see what our battle rattle was. You know, this is a medical kit. You may have saw on our walking into Chow, good God. Whew. No. My Kevlar vest and everything that did not have the plates inserted, but next slide. So yeah, they're trying to sell us some stuff. Next slide. So out, even if they don't get hit by an IED, they may panic and they'll go haywire. We'd say sorry, bye. All right, next slide. Dirty Tampa. This is a garbage area in country, just north of where our Camp Cedar was. This is where the locals would throw their garbage. So this is us heading into Baghdad. Next slide. This is on base in Bayap. Looks like a city, right? These are contractors driving, Americans and non-Americans. So you're just driving around and going to whatever. Next slide. All right. This was an individual that was suspected to be involved, but he wasn't. Well, we stopped and talked to him. Next slide. It's my best friend, Dave Chakanen. This is my bandana I wore on every mission. There were a couple things. I mean, I love baseball. I'm superstitious in a lot of ways. After we lost Kastner, we got put on what they call blackout. Blackout means internet's gone. There's no communications back home because the parties at home that need to get notified will get notified. And that's everybody. There's a phone tree that the women would have, spouses, all that good stuff. and would call. And when our blackout got lifted, my wife at the time, their mother, sent me a message and was just like, I can't believe the last 36 hours I've just been a wreck. This is ridiculous. What is going on with this? And she sent me a prayer that, if you ever get scared, read this prayer. That prayer while we were SPing every base we were at. Hence, I got down the term disciple. And whether you're religious or not, too bad you're going to listen to it. And I wish I could find that prayer. I know I have it because I printed it out. But I do know that there was a line in that prayer that said, even though things all around me or there are bad things happening all around me, with your guidance in the blood of Jesus, it will not touch me. Never did. Next slide. Okay, this one I want you guys to see. Next, hit play on this one. So people ask me, like, what is it like driving down the roads when you're on mission? This was us in Baghdad. See another convoy going north. We're heading south, and people are trying to back up, and then so you don't see crap. You don't see anything. We had our go lights, that we would spot. By the time you spot them, it's like you spotting a cop that's radaring people on the highway. It's too late. So this is very much what it's like. I mean, escorting these convoys and not knowing what's going to happen. I used the term pucker factor in the past. Next slide. Oh, this was on leave. Sorry, Ava. Look at her. She was putty in my hands when I left. But, yeah. There she is. Next slide, please. This is when they picked me up from the airport when I went home on leave. Now, for those of you that know me, would say that I see auras. The first aura I ever saw was when I walked up the concourse, and my wife at the time was holding her. I saw her. She was just nothing. I mean, she was something, but just like, And I saw her holding, and I just saw a light around her. I cried. And this is for like little videos. I'm like, nobody recorded it, but it's like, holy cow, I was just a wreck. That was my son Noah. I made him a uniform that was essentially the same uniform that I wore. But next slide. So here's picture of just the country on fire. Next slide. These are the people that are just locals. Then down south, these individuals live the same way they've lived for hundreds of years. They're nomads, sheep herders. Next slide. This is our waste management. Fire pits. You probably hear a lot about that right now because the PAC Act was recently signed in Congress or Senate. All those fobs burn. What do they do with the trash? They desert and they burn it. They do. Here we have non-recyclables there. These are Ugandans. I love these guys. The Ugandan army came up and was providing security on the bases, and they were just fun individuals. Next slide. All right, hit play on this. So, Hajis were changing a tire. So we're just giving them light. We thought we would try to really screw with them. So my gunner shot off a flare off of his grenade launcher just to see if we got a.
Yeah, well, they didn't come too. They all kind of look, but. Sure. Doing it all.
Next slide. Okay, we're getting to the end, guys. I promise you. So we were done. My company was done. The Roughnecks. That's what our motto was, or whatever. And so everybody always puts a stamp on where they were, who was here, all that good stuff. So we were there in 06, 07. Our tribute to Kastner with. My last mission, the gates country was over. So, while they're closing the gates, I'm gonna just say F you, Iraq. Yeah. Next slide. This was our last mission. We lit up cigars. So we went home. This was the happiest day of my life. Going home, we had a ceremony in Oak Creek. You could tell she really wanted to give me a hug. I remember her mom was like, "Go by your daddy." So, yeah, it was the happiest day of my life. Next slide. This is my family. The kid's mother, Jenny, Noah, Ava, my sister Noelle, Joey, myself, my father, and a shout out to my grandfather. Rest in peace. Yeah, I had the honor of taking him on the honor flight, and I tell you, it was the most humbling thing I've ever done, and it was just great. So, now I'm opening up to you guys.
If you have a question, stand up and I'll bring you the microphone. Anybody? You gotta stand up.
So you're talking about the up armoring, so
I'm-
that was,
I spent a year in Uganda.
the up armoring was all done before you guys got there, or were you still scavenging stuff? Because I know I heard that there was a lot of up armoring, you guys scavenged for whatever, to try to up armor stuff. Or by the time you got there, was it pretty much done professionally, or?
Correct. So what we inherited was that first screen that I showed you about the what our transportation was. That was done professionally, and while we were there, we had to go swap out our doors on even more up armor, which was done professionally. So it wasn't like back in 2003 in the initial push where it was, yeah, they're scrapping around trying to up armor themselves.
Did you have plates for your Kevlar vest?
I did. I had to give them back though. So my body armor, that's the word I was looking for. Noel, can you hand me that? So this body armor, it's Kevlar, but inside you would have a 20-pound plate here in the front, a 20-pound plate there in the back, and then a 15-pound on the side, and then a 15-pound there. So this thing's heavy already. I mean, we're talking like 80, 90 pounds that we're putting up and carrying around. So my shoulders were just huge. Okay.
Tim, thank you very much. Very interesting. I was just curious. I could see air conditioning units on a lot of the places where you stayed. But my question is, when you were staying in tents over there, were those air conditioned, or did you put up with the heat during the day, and then was it pretty cool at night?
Good question. Yes, they were air conditioned, but it was very, very sophomoric air conditioning. What I mean by that is you had essentially a Rubbermaid tube that's just blowing in there. So to get it to be more around you, you would either poke holes in it so it blows out by you, or we would even take the big water bottles that we would get, because they would have huge, like 32-ounce water bottles, and we would make a tunnel, hook it up there, and then just make a tunnel into where you slept, so it's always blowing on you. But to answer your question, yes, we did have air conditioning. It just wasn't that great.
Anybody else out here? Tim, I'm going to ask you for closing comments in a little bit. We always wrap up that way, your thoughts and reflections, but question from me first. Adjustment. How did you adjust to civilian life? That's always a challenge for veterans and so forth. Do you have a circle of other veterans in your unit, or share that with us?
Yeah, great question. Sorry if I'm yelling too much. Yeah, unfortunately, no matter every military member, especially in this conflict, whatever your role was, everybody has a story, and you could have been assigned your job was to guard the MWR on base and have a staff sergeant at the time like me try to get into the MWR, but you know what? I left my ID back in my tent. Well, you can't let James Sergeant. What? I'm carrying an M4. I've got a sidearm, and I'm in uniform. What else do you need? But again, it wasn't his choice. He doesn't make the rules. He just follows them. These individuals would have the same, issues on being away from home. Me personally, I came back and I thought, well, you know what? My life was always at home. My life was always at home. When I dreamt that night, I was back home. PTSD is not, no, I didn't have any PTSD. I had PTSD. Majority of the time when people have PTSD, they don't realize they have PTSD. I call the years after my deployment my dark years. I've had other dark years ever since, right, Mom? But I was selfish. I felt like I was owed something. I played softball 3-4 nights in a week. And then afterwards, we'd go to the bar that sponsored us. I haven't drank in a year and a half. Yeah, family life. So, how we dealt with it, I still have a group of individuals that I'm really close with. Every New Year's Eve, we get together, we bring our kids, or my kids, their kids and family, and we would bring in the new year together. A lot of counseling. Yeah. Post-deployment is an ugly thing because now you're having to deal with where a lot of the casualties, the losses, we've had more losses after deployment than we did before deployment.
We often have family members.
Oh boy, here we
Make
go.
comments and things.
Glad you mentioned this topic because my training is as a licensed professional counselor, and I work with a lot of veterans in Milwaukee Area Technical College. Oops, is it on?
Just closer to the chest.
Closer to the chest, okay.
Chin, your chin.
Oh, chin. So, PTSD is real. PTSD is rampant. I don't want you to feel guilty. I'm glad that people who do get help, and just for any veteran of any age, it can come back at any point in time, and the VA is great. Personal places are great, insurance companies. Just the big thing that I stress is that PTSD is real, and that you're right, Tim. Many, many people do not acknowledge it. It's a tough thing to acknowledge. So we're proud of you, and good job.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
I love you. So,
Tim, I'm going to ask you for closing comments. Everybody, December 19th, come back and we'll go to the south. You have a question? Please come up here, sir. We can't hear you back there. You got to take the microphone.
Tim, I've only known you about a year. Thank you for your service. I honor you for doing what you were ordered to do at the time the orders came through. And I'm so happy that you are with us tonight. God bless you.
Thank you, Ken.
So, U.S. Navy, below the North Pole, back in December 19th, for those of you who can't read. So, Tim, time to wrap up. Closing comments for our group.
I'm going to swap mics with you. That doesn't work that well. So, thank you all. This is the first time I've spoken publicly about this. You guys haven't seen a lot of these pictures, videos. Some of these videos and everything, looking through the cache of thousands of pictures, videos that I have, was like, wow, I forgot about that. Wow, I forgot about that. But it was very therapeutic for me to go through that exercise. One thing I will say is what I've learned through all of this, I mean, my mantra in life is live your life with an attitude of gratitude. You know, no matter how old you are, what you've experienced, where you're at in your life, your journey's not over. You have not ended your journey. It's constantly going to tell you or show you what's good, what's bad, all that stuff. You can argue with yourself about the outcome that happened, but it may not be what you wanted. I've learned to trust my journey, even when I don't understand it. So, thank you all for coming tonight. I would love to talk with each of you individually, but yeah, I don't know. I've taken up enough of your time, and with Scott's technical abilities and everything. Yeah. Thank you, Scott.